And thanks to our friends on the 5, and this is a Fox News alert, a special Hannity investigation into the rampant hypocrisy from the left and, of course, the destroy Trump media when it comes to the issue of election interference. Newt Gingrich, Kellyanne Conway, Greg Jarrett, Geraldo Rivera will all be here with reaction tonight. But first, this may surprise you. For once, I actually agree with the outrage coming from Democrats and the destroy Trump media. It's just pointed in the wrong direction, and that's tonight's opening monologue. Right in the middle of yet another destroy Trump propaganda, foaming at the mouth, feeding frenzy, well, Donald Trump Jr. joined us in an exclusive interview last night to explain the facts behind his meeting back in June of 2016 with a Russian lawyer. Now, I asked him question after question, frankly, until I couldn't think of any other questions. And Donald Trump Jr., to his credit, he answered every single one of them. Now, much to the dismay of Democrats and the leftist media, there was no smoking gun. There was no shocking revelation. What we ended up with is this, that Donald Trump Jr. was approached about setting up a meeting with the offer of op research on Hillary Clinton. He took the meeting about 20 minutes, but the Russian lawyer had nothing. And that was the end of it. And they never talked again. Plus, the lawyer says she does not work for the Russian government. Well, now that we have that out of the way, I want to highlight the Democrats and the media's collective outrage over so-called election interference, collusion, fake news, and explain how they are completely wrong and completely misguided. Now, let's start with the idea of a foreign government interfering in elections and how god-awful it is. Take a look.
There is also now direct evidence, uncontested evidence of people in the Trump campaign at the highest levels conspiring with a foreign adversary to influence our election.
Colluding with a foreign power, partnering with Russia to try and influence our presidential election certainly raises questions.
Are you concerned about Don Jr. and other members of the Trump campaign meeting with Russian lawyers claiming to be representatives of the Russian government or claiming to be part of a bigger plan for the Russian government to influence the presidential election?
Pay very close attention. If the left, if the media, if they are really so upset about all of that, then they should be morally outraged and hysterical about this very explosive report from Politico, January 11th, this year. Here's the headline. Ukrainian efforts to sabotage Trump backfire. Kiev officials are scrambling to make amends with the president-elect after quietly working to boost Clinton. Now, in the article, Politico explains how a DNC operative actually paid, and Ukrainian government officials, they worked to aid the DNC and the Hillary Clinton campaign to hurt Donald Trump during the 2016 election. Now, the report details how this Democratic operative, who used to work in the Clinton White House, led this effort, even met with the Ukrainian diplomats at the Ukrainian embassy to talk about ways to expose former Trump campaign manager Paul Manafort and hurt the campaign. Now, this operative went on to describe those Ukrainian officials as being, quote, helpful when it came to finding leads to dig up information, dirt on Donald Trump and his campaign. Then there's this stunning quote, collusion. She occasionally shared her findings with officials from the DNC and the Clinton campaign. So this DNC operative, paid, was working with Ukraine, also sharing potentially damaging information with the DNC and Hillary Clinton's campaign. Then to top it all off, the DNC operative said that she offered and guidance to, quote, a lot of journalists, you know, those people that suck it all in, who were trying to write stories about the Trump campaign and Paul Manafort. But maybe that's why the media doesn't want you, the American people, to know about this story. Now, were they complicit in this foreign plot to damage the Trump campaign? And here's another example that has been completely ignored. A congressional investigation found back in 2014 an Israeli political group used 300,000 plus taxpayer dollars from the Obama State Department in a grant to create a political apparatus. For what purpose? To try and defeat one of our closest allies, defeat the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in his latest re-election. And next is the media and the Democrats, you know, the ones that are so apoplectic over the idea of collusion. Why have they never reported any of these stories to you? Take a look.
I told you that I thought that was a Kremlin clan and these were his allies. I had a resolution back in February that said it should be investigated for collusion.
I would characterize it this way at the outset of the investigation. There is circumstantial evidence of collusion.
The claims of the administration for the last 6 months that collusion is not even on the table has been undone by the president's son's own words.
This is evidence of willingness to commit collusion.
I think what it means is that a federal judge found that people in Trump's organization were colluding with the Russians.
What would change the world is if, Russia was interfering in the election and they weren't doing it on their own and he was in on it.
What a bunch of phonies. What a bunch of hypocrites. Now, if they're so incensed about all that, then maybe they should start looking to a real example of real Russian collusion. And, of course, I'm talking about the Uranium One deal, which the media never talks about. Here's how that went down. Now, during her tenure as Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton approved the transfer of up to 20% of America's uranium, the foundational material for nuclear weapons. You know that thing? And anyway, that went to Vladimir Putin and the Russians. And guess what? The people who benefited from that deal, well, they kicked back. They poured as much as $145 million into the Clinton Foundation. And at the same time, Bill Clinton, like he always does, trying to enrich himself further, he doubled his speaking fees in Moscow. Now, you don't have to connect the dots on this one because it's so obvious. That's pay to play. Actually, where I grew up, we call it bribery. Now, the Clintons stuffed their pockets while putting America's national security in jeopardy. That's almost as dumb as the Iranian deal. And here's another example of misdirected outrage by the left. Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, the media, all freaking out over fake news. They are fake news. Watch this.
Voters who are being targeted with all of this false information are genuinely trying to make up their minds. They've got to help prevent fake news from creating a new reality that does influence how people, think of themselves, see the world, the decisions that they make.
The general misinformation from all kinds of sources, both domestic, foreign, on social media, that make it very difficult for voters to figure out what's true and what's not.
We are entering a terrible new age of information warfare. And it brings to mind that old adage, the first casualty of war is the truth.
I said in 2008, journalism's dead. Nothing beats the media, the left in this country, complaining about fake news when pretty much every news organization has gotten it wrong when going after President Trump. And all of them had to issue corrections in the campaign and were exposed to basically working with the Clinton campaign. Remember that? Remember WikiLeaks? Anyway, and CNN is out on front of most of this stuff. Now, here's the most overlooked aspect of this crusade by the left. When fake news suits their purpose and their goals, they support it. They spread it. They propagandize. Now, check out this headline from the Washington Times. Quote, Democrats intentionally use disinformation from Russia to attack Trump and campaign ads. Now, the writer's well-known, Rowan Scarborough, well-respected. He's talking about the fake, the discredited. Remember Christopher Steele, the dossier on Donald Trump? And he points out that Steele's dossier and sources included, and I'm quoting, a senior Russian foreign ministry figure, a top-level Russian intelligence officer active inside the Kremlin, a senior Russian government official, and a senior Kremlin official. So, in other words, they were relying and they were spreading information directly sourced to the highest level of the Russian government. Now, instead of stopping all this and the foreign effort to interfere in our elections, well, the dossier was passed around for months and months and months, eventually published by BuzzFeed, routinely cited by Democrats who repeated the false claims from the document to attack President Trump. Remember, that was about the Ritz-Carlton and hookers, and I won't go any further. Not to mention, it ended up in the hands of Senator John McCain. He gave it to the FBI. That led to an investigation. Then there's the group behind this phony dossier, Fusion GPS. As the New York Post has reported, it has several ties to the Democrats, including Clinton allies. So the double standard here is stunning. It's spectacular. And as we have seen time and time again, Democrats are willing to put their party and politics before anything else, even if it means lying to you. And in the case of Donald Trump Jr., He came on this program last night. He answered every tough question about the meeting. Well, isn't it now time for Hillary Clinton, the Democrats, the media, all these people, the Ukraine, those associated with the Ukraine, those in the DNC, to do the same? Now, here's why. We know the Democrats colluded with Ukraine. It's incontrovertible. We know that a DNC operative met with Ukrainian diplomats and shared information with the DNC in the Clinton campaign. We know that members of the Ukrainian government worked to undermine the Trump campaign, which eventually led to the removal of Paul Manafort when he was the campaign manager. That's all been proven. The questions we need answers to now: what else took place? And in other words, how far did these people go? And what did Hillary Clinton know? And when did she know it? And was she directly involved? Now, this double standard, this hypocrisy, is despicable, especially when you consider how the media in this country and the Democrats in this country for now almost 11 months have been freaking out nonstop, never-ending, black helicopter, tinfoil hat conspiracy theories that have been proven to be based on nothing, all while ignoring mountains of evidence in numerous cases that show real election interference and real Russian collusion and Ukrainian collusion. Joining us now, author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, Understanding Trump, former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. Mr. Speaker, good to see you.
It's good to be with you. And listen, before we go on to other things, I want to tell you, Callista and I watched last night with fascination. We thought that Don Jr. did a great job, and I happened to be with his dad this afternoon in the Oval Office, and as we chatted, he's very proud of Don, thought it was a great, really great interview, and watched it carefully. So I think there was a really, really important show, and one that gave somebody a chance without any editing. I mean, the country's looking right there, you and he are talking straight on, and they get a way to measure his sincerity, his honesty, and his openness, including the fact, as he himself said, if he had to do it over again, knowing what he now knows, he probably wouldn't handle it the same way.
And it was
so I just want to congratulate you. I thought it was a very, very important show.
I think it was 20 minutes of his life. He gave all the circumstances. In retrospect, he would have done it different. This is very different. Let's take the Ukrainian situation as one example. Okay, so you have a DNC paid operative sharing the information with the DNC and the Clinton campaign, meeting in the Ukrainian embassy. They're disseminating false information on then candidate Donald Trump. That sounds like collusion with a foreign government. And I guarantee you, anybody that watches CNN or NBC doesn't know this story.
Look, here's a way to think of the current elite media. They rush past a bank robbery to grab one of us for jaywalking. I mean, that's how bad it is. As far as they're concerned, there are no problems on the left. There's no scandal on the left. There's no collusion on the left. But boy, you got to watch out for those Republicans. I mean, they might have had in June of last year a 20-minute meeting. It's absurd. I've said several times now that this is actually much more like the famous play, The Crucible, which is about the witchcraft trials in Salem. I mean, what you have is a news media elite which wakes up every morning saying, I know Trump did something terrible. I wonder what it was. And then they spend the whole day looking for an excuse to write a bombshell, shocking story. I mean, I listened to some reporters this afternoon who Sanders was doing the briefing, and the one guy said, look, now that we know that it's a hard fact that there was a meeting and that it involved collusion, and this reporter is building an entire case that is totally false. And then he springs from that false case to an even more outrageous question. And that's what we're up against, and I predict that for the 8 years of the Trump presidency, we will be in this fight on some topic. In Russia now, something else later, that'll never go away.
Maybe you're right, but I would like every American that knows about the lies and the conspiracy theories. There's no evidence of collusion. Zero. After thousands of hours. How many articles written? But there is evidence of collusion with the Ukrainian government and the Clinton campaign and the DNC. And by the way, and when you get to the dossier issue, I got to be honest. I mean, it gets even worse when they're using Russian sources. Your reaction to that? Or how about Obama trying to defeat Bibi?
Well, you know, let's just take the Ukrainian collusion with the Democrats, because that's such a clear and vivid effort to defeat Trump. It would be really interesting to build a petition drive to demand the House and the Senate and that Bob Mueller investigate the Democrats for what we have as clear evidence of paid full-time collusion. I mean, here you have a DNC had a salary paid by the DNC going to Kiev in order to collaborate and gather information. I'd like to know why the chairman of the House and Senate committees aren't investigating that example of clear and open collusion. And I'd like to know whether or not Bob Mueller, he announced the other night he's certainly going to look into a 20-minute meeting that Don Jr. had. Well, is Bob Mueller willing to say he's prepared to look into the collusion with the Ukrainians on behalf of the Democrats? Or is he only running a one-sided, partisan anti-Trump investigation?
We got to take a break. We're going to have more with former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, after the break. Also tonight, we'll check in with the counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway. She'll react to my interview with Donald Trump Jr. And then later tonight, liberal Joe Scarborough announcing he's leaving the GOP. Wow. Also, wait till you see the most embarrassing musical moment, perhaps, in late-night television history. That's straight ahead. Welcome back to Hannity. So Donald Trump Jr. last night on this program spoke about how the biased mainstream media will stop at nothing to take down the president and his family. Now, here are some of the vicious attacks aimed at Don Jr. just in the last couple of days.
He was admitting that he had met with this Russian lawyer for the purpose of receiving information against Hillary Clinton. I thought, my God, this kid was dropped on his head. As a child, could he possibly be admitting this?
How stupid of Don Jr. I mean, I guess it runs in the family to go on Twitter when he is clearly in legal jeopardy.
This can't be dismissed as people out to get Donald J. Trump Jr. or fake news. This is evidence of willingness to commit collusion.
As we continue with former Speaker of the House,